So, about a week ago, I'm clearing through my fridge, and as I move aside the mixed bag of vegetables, what reveals itself to me is a 2-year-old edible of the mushroom variety. And this 2-year-old block of chocolate in my fridge, I'm often, gazing at from time to time and thinking that is some dangerous stuff right there because the last person who took this chocolate didn't have the most sturdiest trip. And so I look at it and I think, I can just cut it in half. I'll just have half. I'll be fine. You know? And I chew that stuff up like a fly melts down its food. And I swallowed it down. About 30 minutes in, I'm thinking maybe I should take the other half because it's not really hitting me as much. I start to feel kind of good. The room starts to become alive as colors throw themselves at my face, and I start to notice a certain dimensional quality to the furniture as well as to the room that I reside in. I don't find myself being very giddy, so I guess it wasn't the mushroom type that, you know, makes you laugh a lot in the beginning. But then out of nowhere, it hits me. I hear the ringing. I hear the ringing that people often talk about when they take a DMT. I see sacred geometry in waves, beautiful diamonds of blue on a background of yellow. Within those diamonds, purple diamonds, then black diamonds, almost like origami. It's amazing. And it's taken me by surprise because I wasn't prepared for that level of vividry, if that's even a word. It was very crystal clear, almost like I was inside some kind of computer simulation of geometry. And I'm thinking, okay, this was probably a little too much, but let's see. It feels like I'm peaking. Maybe I'm gonna be fine in the next hour or two. I don't know if you've ever taken a psychedelic before, but you always think maybe this moment right here is the epiphysis of the trip. And then you get thrown into it more, and then you think, okay, then maybe this is its peak. But no, then something else happens, then something else happens. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I've taken way too much. I need to throw up. But it's been 2 hours since I've eaten this diabolical influence. And so it's very much digested in my tract at this point. But besides this fact, I throw up anyway. My cat gets up and is looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, don't worry about it, Sophie, I'm good. But I'm just throwing up clear. Nothing's coming up at all. And at this point, I get up to go and find some citrus fruits because I'm told that this can break it down in your system and take you out of a trip. It's either citrus fruits, cherries, or salt. My ability to taste at this point is out the window. I don't really know what's going on. And so I just kind of grab rancid lemons from the bottom of the fridge and chuck it in my mouth and bite. It tastes like alcohol, yet somewhat intact. But again, I can't tell up from down. And at this point, the ayahuasca-like mushrooms is pulling me deeper and deeper into the trip where to the point where my legs have become jelly and I almost blacked out at least 3 times whilst venturing off to the fridge. I spit, I fill up a glass full of water and just dump a bunch of charcoal in there. I'm thinking maybe my body thinks it's a poison, right? We've all had this kind of notion whilst on a bad trip. I can barely back it because it's like there's an intelligence inside me telling me not to throw this stuff up and not to remove it out of my system, not to subdue it even the slightest. And then I just collapse next to my couch and I start to feel the entities of the house. I start to see a very, very tall, almost, I don't know, I would say probably, the door's about 12 feet, so about 13.5 foot being with a black shroud draped over her head, almost like a mannequin, within a house that's not lived in for a while. And as I'm looking at this tall presence that's getting closer to me, I'm like, oh, this is some very weird being. that I often only ever see on San Pedro. And I don't want this thing to get too close to me. And as I'm thinking this, I'm hearing voices. I'm seeing shadow beings besides me, and they feel real, and they look just as real as you or I. So I'm panicking at this point, thinking, okay, the trip's really gone south. I've opened myself up to entities in this house that I otherwise was blocked off from. And now they're going to try and take over my body, because this is what usually happens during a bad trip. Right? I get lucky though, because they stay put. They don't come any closer. And for a while, the trip starts to simmer down in its theme of horror, and it starts to become more past lifey, you know? Showing me Native Americans, showing me literally a woman with a pot on her head walking past me in my living room as the living room space opens up, revealing a completely different landscape. Whilst I'm lying there on the floor, she just turns, looks at me, smiles, and keeps walking in her purple dress. African of descent. It was tied to me, my ancestors. And I'm like, okay, reality is compartmentalizing around me, and I'm existing in all planes at this point. I like this part. I like this part quite a bit. But again, I want this to be over fairly soon. I'm about 3 hours and a half into my trip, and I decide to turn on YouTube. As I'm looking through videos, I'm getting some intense reactions from the people that I'm looking at. It's like I can read them without even trying. Well, I'm reading them without trying. It's like there's this intelligence inside me. It's like taking control of my eyes, and it's focusing so much on certain attributes of certain individuals, where they're coming from when they speak in their YouTube videos. It's peering into their life, into their very soul. I'm seeing too much. And I decide to look up how to end a bad trip, but I only ever come across the same 3 videos that I usually search when I try to end a bad trip. And I'm like, I've seen this before. And just like that, I'm stuck in an infinity loop. I'm like, okay, I've been here before watching this video, because I'm actually still tripping from the last time I was tripping. And the last time I was tripping, has any time ever transpired between these trips? No, I'm always tripping, and it's just one big illusion, me being here and not on something. I'm always there, vibrating, watching beings, having them wait for me to, believe that I've just come back, when really I'm still there and they're just holding me there. Well, not prisoner, but they're waiting, comforting, waiting for me to figure things out. Watching me dive back into the illusion once the substance fizzles out of my system. Now, I know up until this point it sounds like I'm just a scaredy cat and I don't really like psychedelics. And I've done a lot of psychedelics, and it's been a while since I dove back into this realm. And my trip before this one was actually really bad, which is why I panicked a little in this one, because I thought it was going in the same direction. Last time I took some THC edibles in the form of chocolate, and this was a thin pack of chocolate, little squares, and I wasn't sure how much I was supposed to take, so I just took half the pack. Really, you're supposed to take 1 square, if not even half of that, whereas I took like 12. I had way too much THC in my system, and we all know that edibles, specifically because of the way that it's processed by our liver, can be up to 3, if not more times powerful than if you were to smoke it alone in its flower form. What ended up happening was I was throwing up excessively on my bed, not intentionally this time, and having seizures. And it got so bad to the point where Shahrazad was actually thinking about calling the ambulance. And so, and the trip never got better either. Even when it came to what I was seeing, it got very bad, to the point where I would close my eyes in my bed, and all of a sudden I was amongst bodies of black people. I'm not sure why. It's just probably because I was in the dark, and there were no heads to these bodies. They were just rolling into themselves, and I would get thrown in there and get rolled up in the sea of just suspended animation, death. It really didn't feel good. And so understandably, when I took this particular chocolate from my fridge, I was thinking, oh no, it's going in this direction. But luckily, it didn't. Luckily, this time it actually turned out the way a trip was supposed to turn out. The many ways that it's turned out before in my past, and I've been completely accepting and comfortable with. You see, as I'm lying there and I'm seeing ancestors, I'm seeing geometry that am being splayed across time and space. Beings come in through my ceiling of a very abstract form. The ceiling turns cartoony and blue, and I can see space, but not like it is to you or I, but very much like a cartoon or even a video game. Probably something along the lines of Minecraft, what may have you, except not square. And this being comes through and says, "You ready to go?" I'm like, okay, for some reason I'm completely okay. Let's go. And I feel myself and my very being and presence, my place in this time and space get removed from where I was sitting on the floor in my living room, out through my ceiling, out into space, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the planet, I say bye-bye, and I'm gone. Space at this point is blue, it's not black. Remember, it's cartoony to an extent, quite a large extent. And I'm taken through some, what I can only assume were clouds, but they were green. I know it's sounding very, very psychedelic now. And I happen upon another planet where the rest of my trip continues. Now, though it's getting better at this point, when I land on this planet, I start to panic a little bit. I'm like, what's going on here? Where am I? There are some good beings around me that are like, okay, it's time for us to actually start the trip here. And then there were beings that were a part of the environment. Sand dunes, huge. A Goliath type creature comes out of the sand like Atlas carrying the earth, but he's carrying a massive mound, an aspect of the planet. It's huge, yet it's flat on the surface, and he picks this thing up. It's almost big enough to be its own planet. It dwarfs our planet. This thing dwarfs King Kong, the thing carrying this lump of earth into the sky. Red eyes, looks like Aaron Yeager from Attack on Titan, I kid you not, with its jaw being very long. Or if you've seen My Hero Academia, with that big guy that just constantly grows when he accumulates damage. But think even bigger. Bigger! Mix it with Hellraiser and some form of Dr. Seuss's earlier work, which is quite dark, right? Although this place was very bright because it's a desert. It's creepy. I'll probably put pictures on the screen if I have time. Otherwise, good luck when you Google it, because it's kind of terrifying. This thing comes up out of the sand, carrying this earth, and I look at it and I think to myself, King Kong is probably the size of an ant compared to this thing. And at first I was kind of scared, but then I was awestruck and amazed and realized that none of this was going to touch me, because I'm a spectator. And although this thing is looking at me with a red eye that's literally shimmering in lateral directions, something straight out of an anime. At this point, it's real, not cartoon. I recognize that this is my favorite part of a mushroom journey. It's the titanic size of either structures and or entities. I love it. And then I'm thrown again as other entities make their way into my space, donning their traditional outfits, their themes. As they enter, for example, big teeth come at me, gnawing, huge. Another plane of existence comes in, this time 3D, much like if you've seen Lawnmower Man, the guy who has special needs and he becomes super intelligent, tries to take over the world. Well, there's a lot of 80s type retro imagery in that movie. And that is what I'm looking at here, spliced with sacred geometry. I'm like, wow, this is very clear and weird. And as I think that, my consciousness goes in and moves between its mouth, and I can see its individual teeth. They're yellow. And I'm like, wow, not yellow as in he hasn't brushed his teeth, but it's just the color of this being. It's mostly teeth and tiny eyes. And it's just looking at me. So many beings come in and out and just look at me in their own respective ways based on the dimension that they reside in. I'm sure there's so much more that happened that I'm going to miss in this video. But I made this video mainly to tell you about what was going on. Why was the nature of this trip like this? Now, yes, I understand that trips are deeply personal to the person going through them. But I have this gnawing sense in my mind that tells me that my message, or rather the message that was given to me during this trip, is for others too. Heck, that's the only reason why I'm shooting this video. I didn't know what I was going to shoot when I sat down. I had no clue. But in this moment, it's telling me, tell him this. You see, my entire trip was about fear. I've told you about a third of it so far. It gradually changes as I end up in this very heartwarming space of peach hues. No diagonal lines to the room. Almost like I'm in some type of smooth rectangle. And there's a golden river of pee. Or in other words, embryo fluid moving through this space. And I'm bathed in it. And this being, he called himself Big Orion at the time. And I had this moment of existentialism where I was like, aren't we the same thing? And he smiled. And as I'm laying in this river of fluid, my heart literally opens up. And inside is this fleshy, pure lump. Much like, again, a rectangle that's smooth. But from it is my essence. My 5-year-old self, I would say. Pure, untouched, untainted. I never feared the world. I never thought I was bad. I never thought I was ugly or anything other than what I was, which was nothing because I never thought about what I was. I was pure. I never was insecure. I never had any of the pollutants that come into our minds as we grow up. I was fine. I was just perfect. And I was smiling and I was happy. And I was like, this is weird. I hope it doesn't disappear. And it just didn't the entire rest of the trip. The trip lasted 6 hours. And every now and then, a presence of a negative being would come in and just look at me to make sure that I don't miss the message. And at this point, it's pretty abstract to me. I'm still not sure what's going on, the theme of this trip. But then gradually, as I'm lying there and more guides and this big Orion shows up and starts speaking to me, I start to understand the pattern to the point where I then think, okay, I hope I don't forget this. I should record myself on this substance to then, I'm never going to forget this because it's been shown to me so many times it's almost impossible. And that is that fear isn't real. Now, I'm sure there are going to be people in the comment section saying, no, this happened in this particular place. There were dire circumstances in our world. Maybe it's a hurricane or maybe the war or fear of general, genuine physical harm. And sure, of course, you have a reason to be afraid. You could get hurt, you could die. But it wasn't focusing on that aspect of fear, of impending doom. This was imaginary fear. He was saying all imaginary fear isn't real. The term that we've become familiar with is false evidence appearing real. But in this sense, although it was the same sense, it was shown to me as an idea. It broke it down very sophisticatedly. It said it was an idea that we focus on. We shine our consciousness on this idea, and then we become it. We believe that it's real. Just as how you fall asleep into a dream, you know that what you're saying is fake until you believe it and you think it's real. You then don an entirely different character suited for that theme, that dream. That dream. Fear, it's the same way. We get an idea that's not real, but we fixate on it so much to the point where we believe that it's actually part of our reality because we're feeling it now. And then from there, we writhe, they say, in the fear. We roll around in it, and we become disconnected from the reality that everything is always fine. We're safe. We're in an environment very much in the spiritual world that is there to protect us always. And this big Ryan was there, and he was looking at me. He was like, "You're figuring it out." And he watched me come out of it and no longer thrive in, or rather, writhe in fear. Because you don't thrive in fear, it does the complete opposite. And then during moments where I was completely free from the illusion of fear, all semblances of fear that I collected throughout my entire life, from the moment I was a kid, I would fall back into it again. And then the things around me became real. The demons, the scary things. But once I realized I was safe, and Big Ryan said, "Hey, look at those scary things. Look at the things you're afraid of. Confront them. Just look at them." And then they lose their power and they melt and they turn the other way. And that's exactly what happened. Whenever I got afraid and I started writhing in fear, they would show up. I would just look at them. As if to say, what, And then they would melt and disappear. The timing between those moments got larger and larger and larger to the point where I wasn't even thinking fear or feeling it. I was just enjoying the safety of this space. And then when I really, really settled in that sense in this river, it showed me other people out in the world, some might have even been subscribers, that were just cocooned in blankets of gray, and this was representative of their fear. And it said that these people can transmit fear onto you and onto each other simply by word of mouth. They can say something to you, and then all of a sudden you think about it. And then it becomes your internal experience. You can't tell up from down, beginning from the end. You think that it's genuinely happening to you. Now you're afraid of this stuff. You believe it on a cellular level, and now you're just rolling on the floor. Until it melts away, and then you get up. But no one really ever goes back to normal. It becomes almost addictive to then pick up this contagious fear from other people. And I said, this is what people in your world are doing, but at some point, no one's going to do it. And you're all going to come back to this space of fearlessness, because it's not even like you have to think I need to be fearless, because there's nothing to overcome. You're just in your natural state of feeling looked after and fine. And then this big Ryan wrote out a language for me so that I would always remember these specific aspects of the trip. And he took over my hands and then wrote them on my arms in specific areas to help me channel these understandings into my body and into my very energy. I must admit, when the psychedelic wore off, the mushrooms, I swam completely back to how I was before I was on mushrooms. But then after a few days, I just looked at it as the mushrooms made my mind and my synapses very raw. And so perhaps just like kicking up dust, I just reverted. But then after some days, it settled, all the dust settled. And I went back to embodying the very truth that I experienced on the mushrooms. And now I feel pretty good. Very, very, very good, in fact. It's not real. If you ever think that something is real, whether it's imaginary or it's something in front of you, just look at it dead in the face and confront it and see which direction it goes.